1,000 episodes. Congratulations, Jesse. This is Lou Sitzma over at Lou's Reviews on YouTube, your podcasting buddy, your Babylon 5 podcasting buddy. 1,000 episodes, that just blows my mind, man. I don't know how you've done it. And I just want to say again, congratulations. And if you ever want to have someone on to talk to you about Canadian music, which you've in your 1,000 episodes already, you must have had that done by now, surely. I'll be glad to talk to you anytime about Rush, the Guess Who, Tragically Hip, and so many more groups from Canada. And hope that you can keep the loving going for another 1,000, man. Congratulations. And yeah, take it easy, eh? Bye-bye.
Yeah, I mean, some of my some of my earliest memories as a kid were Sunday morning music, and we would go to church, to like the Presbyterian church down the road, and we'd come home, and my mom would have music playing, and that was like, it's such a vivid memory for me, walking in the door on a Sunday morning, or if I slept in and coming downstairs on a Sunday morning, and music would be on. So it would be like Springsteen, the Eagles, Mellencamp, the Beatles. And then later in the day, like Meatloaf and AC/DC, so it was like total, grew up in like a classic rock house.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Set Listing Bruce, your podcast all about Bruce Springsteen, his music, and mostly his fans. I am your host, Jesse Jackson. We are recording this on February 1st, and if I can't be in Tampa, there is no place I'd rather be than sitting here in the Set Listing Bruce studio talking to my new friend, Zack Morrison. Zack, welcome to the podcast.
Jesse, thank you so much for having me. It is such a pleasure to be here. And if I couldn't be at the show, I would prefer to be here as well.
Absolutely. So tell us a little about yourself.
Yeah, and I apologize in advance. I'm getting over a cold because I'm in New Jersey right now, and it's like the first actual cold day all year. So I figured I could just take this in the total bass voice for the whole show. No, I'm a filmmaker. I'm a comedy writer. I'm from New Jersey, born and raised. A lot of the reason I got into filmmaking and storytelling is because of Bruce. And so, he's been a huge influence on me as an artist and me as a storyteller. I went to Rutgers, also, in New Jersey, like really trying to be on brand as much as possible. And I grew up in East Brunswick, which is like 2 towns away from Freehold. So it's about as like cliche Bruce fan as you can get. But it's been great, and I've been fortunate enough where I've been able to work in entertainment for most of my career. So it's trying to get my own stuff out into the world.
Any chance the first time you heard of him was at summer camp?
Oh man, well, so I was a Boy Scout,
Okay.
and I think by that point I already knew who Bruce was. There were many other things that were first time discoveries at summer camp. But
well, the reason I ask is it is one, it feels like if you're an older white sportscaster, good chance you're going to be a Bruce fan,
yeah.
And there is at least a third of the people, if they grew up on the East Coast, they discovered Bruce in summer camp, either because one of their cabin mates had an album or one of the counselors had an album. It is, there are reasons things become cliches, and that is something I'd seen. So yeah, I always love when I talk to someone who grew up in Jersey, because when I get to the question, and I will in a few minutes, like, how did you discover Bruce? It's like saying, when did I discover water?
Right.
It's just around there. But before I get to that, talk about, you said you grew up in Jersey. What kind of music did your family listen to? Was it a musical family? What was being played?
Yeah, I mean, some of my earliest memories as a kid were Sunday morning music, and we would go to church, to like the Presbyterian church down the road, and we'd come home and my mom would have music playing, and that was like, it's such a vivid memory for me, walking in the door on a Sunday morning, or if I slept in and coming downstairs on a Sunday morning and music would be on. So it would be like Springsteen, the Eagles, Mellencamp, the Beatles, and then later in the day like Meatloaf and AC/DC, and so it was a total, grew up in like a classic rock house. And that was primarily the music that my parents listened to growing up, along with like um James Taylor, Gordon Lightfoot. I kind of like, it was a mix of like rock and folk music. And that was, for the earliest years of my life, that was kind of what, oh, this is what music is. I like this. I never felt that like all my friends listened to like whatever was on like Z100, which is like a top 40 station in New York, or whatever like the rap hip hop thing was in the early 2000s, because that's what the thing was. And so I always felt like a strong connection to my parents' music, as opposed to the music of my friends. And that was always like, I mean, I remember there was one day at like baseball practice, and this must have been, oh man, I don't know, sixth grade, fifth grade, like we were very little, and my friends were talking about a new Eminem song. And in my head, I was like, oh, right, the jingle from the new Eminem's commercial is really awesome. Like, I like that. It's funny. And they're like, Zach, what the hell are you talking about? And so yeah, so I've always kind of, as a kid, grew up with like what my parents were listening to.
So first, thank you. You just gave me my little snippet I will put at the beginning of the episode. And secondly, you just made me feel so happy, because I've shared this often on the podcast. We were my dad and mom were country music people. I mean, there was never a top 40 station on the radio ever. And I remember maybe some 50s like Chuck Berry. I know my mom loved Bobby Darin, but
Yeah.
this was country. And so I remember we were living in Louisiana at the time. We went or Kentucky. We visited some cousins in Ohio, and they were shocked I could not name all four Beatles. This is like in 68, 69, right? I mean,
Right.
they were shocked I could, and I was like, I don't know. You know, I had no concept. Probably the only time I heard them is when one of my cousins said, yeah, they think they're better than Jesus. It's so you never had a feeling of rebellion. You never wanted to like find your own. I mean, I'm sure you found your own music later, but you never felt this need to, oh, that's my parents' music, I need to find my own.
I mean, no, because when I was, at that age, I mean, this is like, I don't know, we're 7, 8, 9, 10. You don't really have that concept of what's my music, what's their music,
Right.
And then by the time, and I got lucky because by the time I started getting into like middle school and high school, I already knew that I wanted to be a filmmaker and a writer. Like I got extremely, extremely lucky where I knew I wanted to do that at a young age. And so I started exploring in the what's my voice, what do I have to say thing, early on. And so I never really felt the need to rebel against what my parents and the music that they had. To me, is like that's music, and that's inspiring me to tell my own stories. So it was more the I think the lyricism of the songwriting, and not just Bruce, but also the Beatles, and and all these other just musicians that you spend hours listening to, and you don't even know you're listening to them because it's just playing in the background all day every day. And so yeah, I mean even like Gordon Lightfoot songs like that, my parents had one of those CD players that like it would shuffle 5 CDs, and Gordon Lightfoot was one, Bruce Greatest Hits was one, the White Album was one, the Eagles Best Of, and the fifth was kind of like the one they always cycled through. So those songs were just always on. And so I would just listen to them and realize like, oh, these are musicians writing stories and talking about these characters and bringing us to a different world. And that's what I want to do. So if anything, it subconsciously, in hindsight, maybe allowed me to start to lean into that and dig into that a bit more. And so, I mean, I found, when I growing up, becoming a teenager or whatever, and I discovered music that was my own, but I never felt the need to rebel against my parents. If anything, I felt a confidence that I enjoyed that, at that age.
I always am interested when someone talks about having this sense early. One of my best friends is a guy named Tom Zoller, and he is a award-winning uh, comic book artist and writer. He's worked on the My Little Pony books. He's best known for his self-creation Love and Capes, which is a superhero sitcom. And when we talk, he says as long as he can remember, he knew he wanted to draw for a living. Like the moment he had a crayon in his hand, he knew that's what he wanted. And I ended up being in customer service, and I had no idea that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. So talk to me a little bit why you had that need right away, that calling to tell stories.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can pinpoint when I got hit with the creativity bug.
Okay.
I the moment I wanted to be a filmmaker is something I'll never forget. That's when like Christmas every year we would do like a big Lego set, my grandpa and I, and we'd open presents, but then like the final thing would be this, like, whether it's a pirate ship or a Star Wars thing, just some like activity that we could work on while everyone else was nursing a hangover and waking up, and one year, I think it was like 1999, 2000. It was like before 9/11, and it was a Steven Spielberg Lego set. So you built a little Jurassic Park scene with, like, the people and the dinosaur, but you also built the backlot and the set and the lights and the people and the crew people and stuff. And it was really neat. But the kicker was it came with this a little camera, and it also had this little editing software, and this was a kid's toy. And in the book that, like the building instructions for how to build a set, you flipped it over and it was a storyboard for how to shoot this little Lego scene. And you could actually shoot it with the software and edit it together. And that broke my brain. And from that point, I was like, oh, I stopped playing with Legos after that, because who needs Legos? I have this camera, and here's the instrument of my creativity now. And so that, firmly burned into my memory. But I was always creative before that. I was always doing little bits, or putting on shows for my parents in a cardboard box and making a TV out of it. Or I started playing music when I was, I think it's like fourth grade, because that's when you start like playing an instrument, in the school system in New Jersey. So it was always a thing. And then as I got older, getting into, again, that kind of middle school teenage angst, who am I, why am I here, what really stuck out to me and what resonated with me growing up in New Jersey is the fact that it's kind of the mecca for a lot of this kind of East Coast rock and roll sound. I mean, I didn't know Asbury Park, but it's there. Like the Stone Pony is an institution. The entire sound of that entire generation of musicians kind of formed there. I grew up in East Brunswick, which again is two towns away from Freehold. In the other direction, 2 towns away, is Sayreville, and that's where John Bon Jovi is from. And a town over is Perth Amboy, and that's Richie Sambora. A couple towns north is Hoboken, and that's Frank Sinatra. And I started to realize, like, oh wait, you can be an art. You can grow up in New Jersey and be an artist, and that could be your life. You can do this. I can do this. If they can do it, so can I. And I kind of was like, oh, I guess that's what people here do. They start writing songs or poems, and then they become famous. And so it was both like the existential, who am I and why am I here? And it was also the practical, at some point I'm going to have to apply to colleges, and at some point I'm going to have to know what I want to do with my life. And music and art and creativity was kind of, it kept coming back to that. Music was kind of my way in to it all. I really only started writing because I was trying to write songs and be a songwriter. I wasn't very good at it, but that was how I started first working those creative muscles, was like doodling in my notebook in middle school, science class, and trying to put rhymes together.
So you did start out with writing music. It wasn't always a visual art for you, even though you had the little camera and you had the little editing. There was a call to to be creatively, either musically and not just telling stories. Your first part was trying to tell a musical story.
Yeah. I mean, music was, again, it was always a thing. I grew up playing the saxophone, which but I didn't know who, like, I didn't have a sense of like who Bruce Springsteen was and who Clarence Clemens was. I just knew, oh, that's a cool instrument. I liked how that sounds. And so I started playing the saxophone in fifth grade. At that point, I've already seen the Blues Brothers way more times than a fifth grader should. And that's my favorite movie of all time. And I would argue it's one of the best movies ever made. And so just the music and the filmmaking were kind of two different things. But when I watched, I watched the Blues Brothers. I watched, at that point we're getting into like SNL Andy Samberg sketches. And oh, you can do musical comedy. Like you can be musical and you can also be a filmmaker. Oh my God, this is it. Like here it is. Here's how I can take my passion for music and my passion for visual storytelling, whether it's taking pictures or doing little videos, and I can put them together. And so those two passions, the music and the film, they were developing at the same time. For every video project in middle school and high school, because every class had you do a video project. I was like, this is great. I don't want to write a paper. Let me just go shoot a video. And so that was kind of always happening. And then at the same time, I was playing in the jazz band in high school. And I didn't march because I sat the bench in football, but did the jazz band. And then again, it's kind of like a central New Jersey thing. Ska was a huge genre, especially in the area. And so I was like, oh, maybe I could be a horn player, a saxophone player in a ska band. That would be cool. But yeah, so the two things were kind of always this omnipresent force in my life, especially growing up. And I just didn't know what to do with it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. When you talk about like Bruce being in the atmosphere, or at least I did, when did you first really become to aware of Bruce and the E Street Band, and tell me what about them appealed to you? What about them did you find special?
Yeah, so I know anyone from my town, from East Brunswick, New Jersey. There was a sixth grade, like the middle school gym teacher. His name was Mr. Mack.
Okay.
And every day he would play Born to Run as like the song. Hey, all right, it's time to stretch. Everyone stand up. We're going to stretch for 5 minutes. And he would play Born to Run. And the reason everyone knows that is because anywhere in the school you could hear, he would just turn up and blast it. And so everyone in the school knew that, oh, Mr. Mack is doing gym class now because Born to Run is playing. Now, at that point, I've heard the song again from my, growing up with my parents, CD player. But I didn't know who Bruce was. I just knew this is a cool song. And then after I spent a semester in that class listening to Born to Run every single day, I was like, oh, this is cool. I like this. There's the saxophone solo, and it's very rock and edgy, and we're talking about getting out and busting out of town, and the whole, that New Jersey inferiority complex that we have with New York City in one direction and Philly in the other. And so I started paying attention to the lyrics because I had to be there in class for 5 minutes doing my stretches. And so I started kind of falling into the daydream of the actual story he's telling in that song. And then from there, I started realizing other songs that I liked and didn't know who they were by were also Springsteen songs, because his voice sounds different over the course of, like, every album has a different sound to it. So I didn't realize that Hungry Heart was also Bruce Springsteen and Dancing in the Dark was also Bruce Springsteen, because they're all totally different sounds, and so I started putting those things together and kind of realizing, oh, this is all one artist's body of work. That's awesome. Let me start really paying attention to it now. And yeah, and then once I did that, then I fell in love with the lyrics, and I started really, so it kind of just became this rabbit hole that I went down. And I think what attracted me to it was the narrative, the cinematic qualities of his lyrics, because there's a bunch of other songs that were on the radio at that time are very shallow. We're just going to say exactly what it is, and we're just going to it's sex and it's whatever, it's blah, 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 blah. But a Springsteen song is a narrative, and there weren't many other artists that I was listening to where it's like, I'm going to tell you a 3-minute story.
Yeah.
And because all my friends at that time were listening to either rap, which I didn't like, or the kind of emo, screamo, Warped Tour stuff, which is fun. Like throwing on at a party, that's great. But those lyrics are so depressing. If you actually listen to the lyrics, they're awful. And so Springsteen became the artist where I just wanted to turn on a song and close my eyes and just listen to it, because each album's different, each song is different. And so yeah, and this is, again, I'm a sixth grader, I'm 12 years old, and I'm kind of going through that moment where I'm, in addition to discovering this new artist, I'm also beginning to realize, wait, I'm an artist too. What is my voice? What am I trying to do? And so all those things kind of were happening at the same time.
How big of an influence do you think Springsteen is to your storytelling? And what are some of your other influences?
I mean, he's definitely a huge influence. I don't know if there's like a one-to-one comparison that I would ever attempt to make.
Right.
But because a lot of my stuff, it's character driven, but it's also it's comedy, it's situational, and I like to poke fun at those kind of minutia absurdities that we have in everyday life. And I guess to a certain extent, that's a lot of what his songs are about those tiny small moments. Like Wreck on a Highway is a small moment. Spirits of the Night is a small just slice of life in that character's life. And I mean, those are, a lot of the scripts that I've written or the films that I made, the characters are all dealing with relatively small stakes, but that's where we can dig in and find the true emotional nugget of it. So I don't want to look at his songs and say, oh yeah, I listened to that and I knew I wanted to do that, because it didn't really happen that way. But I mean, I know that SNL is a huge influence on me, and I feel like what's great about an SNL sketch is it does the same thing. It takes a very, very, very small little oddity of life and it exaggerates it to the nth degree. And that to me is funny. Like, I don't, I want to poke fun at the little things and like the little absurdities in life.
There is a writer that I really love named Lisa Lutz, and she wrote a series of novels that about a family that were privatized, called the Spellmans. And she talks about in the book signing, like, there's no murders in my books. Like one of the mysteries one of my characters is solving is why her teacher, when he blows his nose, puts the tissue in a top drawer, not the wastebasket. Right. That's the kind of mystery I'm going to get.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Right. So I love that idea. And, I was telling you, I watched one of your films, and it's all about just, I'm out of college. What the hell do I do? And it's a musical. It was amazing.
Thank you very much. That film was Everything's Fine, a Panic Attack in D major. That was my MFA thesis film. I went to grad school for writing and directing at Columbia in New York, and that was kind of like my big thesis project. And again, that music has always been the side thing for me. Filmmaking is primarily the focus, and that's kind of the medium I work in. But having that musical background and being able to write songs and all those, that kind of daydreaming I did in middle school and high school, I was able to bring that back together, because now, here's a chance to do a musical comedy a la the Blues Brothers, a la Andy Samberg sketches or Crazy Ex-Girlfriend, and let's write these silly songs that we can dive into this bigger issue of anxiety and FOMO and depression and the kind of consequences of social media and all that stuff. Because that's really kind of what all that film was about, is the existential crisis I was going through at 25.
Yeah.
So, but being able to bring music, always having that in my back pocket has always been a source of comfort for me. And just knowing that, even though music's not the thing that I wanted to pursue or felt I was good enough to pursue for the long haul, being able to whip out a guitar and write a song or even just like do Springsteen at karaoke or whatever it is, like that's always been fun for me. And so having that as part of, something in my toolbox that I can just, have ready as an artist has always been exciting.
So Zach, it, and you may not be able to separate this. Do you feel more comfortable writing or directing, or is it just the two sides of the same coin to you?
It's definitely two sides of the same coin for me. I mean, I love being on set and directing and bringing, channeling the energy and being there. And because it's sort of this feedback cycle of adrenaline and creativity and adrenaline and creativity. And that, when you're in work mode, it's a lot of fun. But I really like writing because that's where the magic really happens. And I find that as a director, that's an extension of writing. And, if we're trying to create this world or bring this thing together, it all has to be there on the page. Yeah, we're gonna bring actors in and they'll have ideas, and the cinematographer is gonna have ideas, and the art department and wardrobe, they'll all bring stuff to the table. But I find that just sitting with a notebook that's the most liberating, calming state of being for me, because that's like I can just word vomit whatever is in my head onto paper. And and that's what I always admired about songwriters, is that their whole day is just writing.
Yeah. Do To go back a little bit to Bruce, I always like to preface this. The amount of times you've seen Bruce is not a fair barometer of how big of a fan you are, but are you someone who counts the number of shows? And if so, how many?
I've only seen him 4 times. I mean, it's
Okay.
not, I saw him once in high school on a date with someone who did not like Bruce Springsteen. So I do not recommend that. Saw him at
Yes.
the Izod Center in New Jersey, and it was the Magic Tour, but it was before they announced that he was doing that residency at Giant Stadium to close the stadium down.
Okay.
And at the show, because it's the same thing now. He announces all the basketball arena shows. Everyone buys the tickets, and then like next year he'll do the football stadiums, or next summer,
Right.
or. But back then I was like, oh yeah, he's coming. Let's go get tickets for the basketball arena show in the Meadowlands.
Yeah.
And at the show, he announces like the 5-night, 8-night residency to close down Giant Stadium. And they showed video of the side of the football stadium and the Jumbotron, and they unveiled the big banner, East Street, legendary East Street Band residency at Giant Stadium, closing the stadium down. And that was obviously the show I should have or wanted to have been at. But
Yeah.
instead I got stuck like behind the stage in the basketball arena on a date with someone that didn't want to be there. So
And
it
she's
was,
going like, is it over yet?
yeah, she's like,
Okay.
oh, another song. Really? It's like a second encore. We're here for 4 hours.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, it wasn't great. I mean, I had a great time. The music,
Yes. Yeah.
it was awesome.
Yeah.
Because Magic was the first album that, like, as a fan of Bruce on my own, I sought out to listen to.
Hmm.
So it was cool. It was cool to hear, even Radio Nowhere, which is
Yeah.
now as an adult nowhere near my top 10. But
Yeah.
it was just neat to hear. Oh, I bought an album, and let me go listen to the guy who wrote it and performed it live.
Yeah.
So that was my first, and then I went to the 2012 show and the 2016 show at the Meadowlands. Those were great. The 2016 show was the first time he broke his record. It was like 4 hours and 2 minutes, and then the next night was 4 hours and 4 minutes, and I was pissed.
Yeah.
Uh,
That was that he did 3 shows that
yeah,
tour. And so I was at the second one. Then he went and came back and did a third one. And I know, yes, it was the first time where at the end of a show I said, I've had enough. I'm good. No, you don't need to do another one, Bruce, because
yeah,
it's like one more, and at that, it was the one where the couple got engaged and they
right, right,
and they had uh Jersey Girl and fireworks, and it's just crazy. It's just crazy. All right.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the 2012 show I went to, I
Yeah.
made the mistake. He announced 3 shows, and I made the mistake of going to the middle show,
Okay.
which in hindsight was a mistake because that was the deep cut night.
Okay.
You know,
Yeah.
that was a night where he played all of the deep cuts. Gary U.S. Bond showed up. I had no idea who that was when I was there.
Yeah.
And so I like he didn't play Thunder Road. He didn't play Born to Run. Like it was a very mellow,
Yeah.
downer kind of a show. And so for the 2016 tour, I was like, okay, I'm not buying night 2 because if he announces night 3, it's going to become the middle show, and I don't want to do that again. So I went to night 1, which was fine. But then the next 2 nights he played longer and longer, and then there was that wedding night, and
Yeah.
the whole thing. So those were my 3 concerts, and then I saw him on Broadway.
Oh, good. As a storyteller, I want to get to that. So let's talk about Springsteen on Broadway, the live experience, then Ziminy's film, and then Western Stars. I'd love to hear your thought, not only as a fan, but as a filmmaker of those 2 films.
Yeah. Which one should we start with?
You dealer's choice.
Well, so the Broadway, and are we talking about the Broadway show, like the filmed version on
Yes.
Netflix,
Yeah.
and then Western Stars? Okay. The Netflix one was, I mean, it was fine. I saw it live before they released the Netflix show, and so just the being in the room. That's why live theater is so great. That's why going to see a show on Broadway, even if it's a one-man show like this,
Yeah.
nothing beats that experience, because when you're in the room and you're only, I don't know, 100 feet away, even in the back row, you're not very far away from the stage. To experience that raw emotion with a group of strangers, there's nothing like that. There's nothing like that in the world. That feeling of that shared experience of witnessing someone perform, in whether it's like Bruce, or it's a live show, or a play, or a musical, or whatever. It's nothing beats that. So it was cool to go to watch the Netflix production and say, oh yeah, I was there. I saw this was great. And obviously they had, they shot it very well, and it was very well produced, and they had access to the stage that no vantage point from the theater would have. But I just, it felt a little flat for me because I saw the show and I was there, and I cried. I was with my mom, and we were both bawling our eyes out the whole time. When I watched it on Netflix, it was okay.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, right, is my son and wife, did not go to Broadway. They were sweet and said, go, and so he watched it for Father's Day one year, and he's a casual fan at best. He's done 2 shows, and he was blown away because didn't see it live, and he was just surprised at the amount of emotion that Bruce was sharing. And so I agree. I'm glad we have a permanent record of it, because I do think, though, when I'm asked sometimes, people who are casual fans, well, do you think this is the last tour? And I said, I don't know. I said, but the reality is Bruce could keep touring. He could do Springsteen on Broadway till he's 80. I mean, till he's 85,
Right.
if he wanted to set up a residency, and in the UK, or go wherever he wanted. How about Western Stars? Now that's more of a traditional film, right? There's still the live, but with the things in between, the vignettes.
Yeah, I really liked Western Stars. I mean, it's a film. I wouldn't call it a movie,
Right.
but it's because it's a concert film with very, I mean, interesting and beautiful imagery, kind of, these little vignettes bringing us between each song. I loved it. I was living in LA at the time, and I was in Century City, and there's a big mall, with a big movie theater at the Century City Mall. And one day I randomly just walked to the theater just to go see it. It was an empty theater. It was just me, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. That album, to me, it's not an E Street Band album, so as the songwriting in it is very interesting. And again, kind of getting into I mean, he plays with those tropes because he's talking about like old Hollywood, kind of golden age, 50s and 60s, kind of Hollywood motifs with, the stuntman and a bunch of those others. And so I thought as just a concept album, as just a story, beginning, middle, and end, it was great. And then to see it live, like the live version that they made for the film, way better than the album. And I try to I love that like Jim Rotolo on E Street Radio exclusively plays the film version whenever they do a Western Stars track in the playlist. It's always the
Yeah.
film version because it's just a much better production.
Yeah, I love that. I agree. I'm a big fan of the TV series Justified, and I've read a couple of Elmore Leonard books, and I'm like, this feels like a collection of Elmore Leonard short stories, maybe Zane Grey, Louis L'Amour. I mean, it it's very different from Nebraska tonally and musically, but the same idea of a collection of short stories, that works. That's good. Um, so let's go back to you went to university, you got your master's. Um, talk to me where your creative journey is taking you. And I understand you've got a new project.
Yeah. I'm in the middle right now of finishing post-production on a comedy pilot that I wrote it during the pandemic. It was sort of a screw it. I need to do something to keep myself sane in lockdown. And in it's called Canusa Street. It's a half hour, very kind of NBC, like a Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Parks and Rec, Mike Schur kind of a show. And it's about U.S. Border Patrol agents in a town in Vermont where the U.S.-Canada border cuts the town right in half. And this is a real town that exists. It's called Derby Line, Vermont. And like homes, buildings, stores, all bisected by the border because when they built this town, no one cared. And then
Right.
fast forward to today, they're like, oh, we messed up, which to me is hilarious. So it follows the U.S. Border Patrol, and they're kind of the de facto, dumb police squad in town, and the lead agent, her nemesis on the Canadian Mounties is her twin sister, and
Okay.
and that's the show. It's like a police procedural, and we have a case of the week, but we're dealing with again the hyper minutia absurdity of small town quirkiness, which growing up in New Jersey, I East Brunswick, Central New Jersey. For anyone who's going to tell me Central Jersey does not exist, it does because I'm from there, and that's where you can get Giants fans and Phillies fans living across the street in harmony.
Right.
You get your Springsteen fans and your Bon Jovi fans, and they can get along. But at the same time, we will argue with each other over the name of our local breakfast meat because we disagreed. Some people call it Taylor ham, some people call it pork roll, and there will be fistfights over this stuff. And so I grew up in just everything was divided, everything was cut in half. It was always which team is it? Yankees, Mets? Is it Giants, Jets? Is it there was always a divide, and those divides are so insane to me because who cares, But you grow up in this kind of the kind of tribalism of the sports team. It's like it's our team against their team, and and that also gets into politics and all that stuff. And so when I was writing this show, I was just kind of fascinated by this town, and I kind of fell in love with the absurdity of a international border running through the middle of a grocery store, and how do you deal with that, So that's the show. And in 2020, I wrote it when we were all stuck inside, and then I started sending the script around in 2021, and it made some progress in Hollywood and got some attention of different script aggregates and screenplay competitions were talking about it. And then end of 2021 into 2022, I was able to raise the money to produce the first episode. And so we were early 2022, like April, May. I was in Chisholm, Minnesota, where we shot the show. And so that's kind of been my baby for the last year, kind of working on that. And we're now at a point where we're getting ready for film festivals and also trying to, sell the show to a streamer like Netflix or Hulu, someone who won't cancel it after the first season.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, that's a whole nother debate that we could talk about that there's a lot of angst right now about some of the streaming services not being as patient. I think that's interesting. It's happened to me. Like I think of people that, I'll look at my family lived in Louisiana, but we lived in Kentucky for a while. And I remember that driving, and there's the sign, you're now entering Eastern time zone. And the idea, I said, what if your city is like, how weird is it that if you drive 10 minutes to go to the local grocery store, it's now a different time, right?
Right, right.
And so I think that very cool. I know I've talked to a lot of people growing up in Chicago, and you're either a Cub fan or a White Sox fan. Yeah, and being like, you couldn't be both. No,
No,
you
no, you
could
because you have to pick a side.
Yeah, you have to
It's
pick a
all
side.
about picking a side.
Yeah, it is. That's great. So it sounds hilarious.
Thank
And
you.
and I'm a big I loved Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I think, the what's beautiful about these kind of series when you do it right is you fall in love with the characters, right? And that the cast each has a chance to shine, and you start developing people you love. So best of luck to you. That sounds a lot of fun.
Thank you. It's been the creative highlight of my career so far.
Mhm.
And because I when I was in grad school, I interned at The Tonight Show and Saturday Night Live, and I got to be in the room where it happens and witness it
Yeah.
all. And it was really and that was always a dream to me. But now I'm excited because I'm finally doing my first big thing.
Yeah.
If the short film, if everything's fine, was that was kind of my maybe my artistic coming out statement. This was like
Right.
here's my first thing that I'm gonna actually give, put out there. And like there were a bunch of short films before that, and but that was the one that really kind of took off, and that brought me to LA, and it got me my manager. It won an Emmy one year, and so that was sort of like how I kind of got into the world.
I was going to
And
say it received a fair amount of awards, correct? And a little bit, yeah, it appeared. I was looking at it today, and it's a great film. I'll include the link in our show notes. It is just really beautiful. But I saw that it had been nominated in a lot of festivals, so you must be really proud of it.
thank you. Yeah, I really am, and it's such a sweet piece. It'll always have a place in my heart.
Right.
But what I'm excited about though with Canoe History is that this is kind of the first big thing.
Hmm.
I feel like in the way that artists like Bruce, where he had two albums and he was kind of like trying to find his voice and find his thing, and then he did that first big thing that kind of really took off for him. I don't know if Canusa Street is going to be that for me, but it feels like this is the first time I'm putting that effort into a project. So I'm excited to see where it goes. We're still in the very, very early stages with it. I only have the first episode, and TV doesn't normally happen this way. So I'm just trying to get it out there, and hopefully someone likes it.
Yeah, that's good. You is the next process you've mentioned going to festivals, just getting people's the view on it, and then seeing hopefully someone that is a decision maker goes, I see potential here. Is that the next step?
Yeah, that's kind of the plan. I mean, TV mostly and scripts and movies, they mostly get bought and sold on the page with the script, and
Right.
the script is the thing that
Right.
that is sort of the currency. But just through the 19 different, you know, perfect storms of situations that happened that allowed us to be able to shoot the whole thing, the thought was like, oh well, let's shoot it because we can. We have the ability to do it, and now maybe someone can watch it instead of reading it and trying to guess what the jokes are. Now they can just see it.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, the hope is now that we just get it in front of eyeballs. I mean, it's just like my buddy Bobby Mahoney. He plays in a band in Asbury Park in New Jersey all the time, and I admire the tenacity that him and his band are always putting into their work, because it's like the hustle to get someone to listen to the next thing and to do shows and to keep grinding like that. And that's kind of in the phase where I am now. It's like I have to just be putting my stuff out into the world as much as I can. Filmmakers, though, that they can't play concerts.
Right.
We need the venue to invite us in, as opposed to we can do a show here and a show there. So it's I'm figuring out as I go.
You know, one of the things that I'll go back to my friend Tom, as an independent, he's always thinking of new ways to promote himself, new ideas for books and angles and things and it you have to be kind of a businessman and a marketing person as well as a creative person, don't you? I mean, in today's the way things work today.
Yeah, you're always, I mean, you're doing 7 jobs at once. You're yourself the artist. You have to make the material. You then have to produce the material and be the producer and work with the technology and the engineering and the mechanics of making the thing. And then you have to be your marketing specialist and your PR person, and you have to get it out there. And it's a constant grind. You're working all day, every day on your own stuff, in addition to the job that you need to pay the bills.
Yeah.
So it's I mean, but it's exciting though, because like I don't want to do anything else. And
Right.
I feel like most artists they get that. And I know a lot of people don't get that because it's like, oh, well, what do you mean? You don't have a job right now? I'm like, no, I'm in between, but I have 2 gigs coming up next month, and I'm working on my own. So it's like there's always just 19 different things going on. And it's exhausting, but it's what I want to do.
Yeah.
It's like I can't see myself doing anything else at this point.
Mhm. Um, so what do you have coming up? What are anything that you want to promote?
No, you're actually catching me in between in between things right now. I mean,
Okay.
hopefully we'll have a date for Canusa Street soon, and once I know where we're gonna play, I'll be blasting it out to the world. But for now,
Absolutely.
for
Yes.
now, it's that weird waiting game where you have something and there's nothing more you can do at this point, and you're just like waiting for 7 different decision makers to say yes.
So I had a guy on who is the leader of a band. They do kind of uh, almost a s- a 70s kind of soul band with a lot of horns. They tour, and I was talking to Ryan, and he was saying that the 3 hours he's on stage is the easiest part of the job. Just getting on stage, singing, playing music is the easy part. The hard part is booking the gigs, figuring out who gets a hotel room, how many times do we stop in the van because someone's got to use the bathroom, but we've got to make your through and no, this is he says all that other stuff is the hard part. Getting in front of the stage and just singing is like a vacation. So I'm thinking a lot of times you're creative, right? Like all the other stuff is just as important, but it is it's the true work of it.
Yeah, I mean the days where I can just wake up and walk on set and just go to work, like that's fun. Because that's why we're here. That's game day. That's putting suiting up
Yeah.
and putting your jersey on and going to work, and that's fun for me. Um, I think part of the reason it's fun for me is because I know all the work that went into it to ensure that like we're good to go today. All the director's homework, all the rewriting, all the planning, all the pre-production. I know I think I can get into that comfort zone because I know that I know what I'm here to do, and I did my prep, and I know everyone else did theirs, and then we can just enjoy it and make the thing.
Yeah. Yeah. There is that sense of we're all in this together. We're building it. I always think back of Kevin Pollak in one of his podcasts says, look, no one tries to make a bad movie. Okay. Like, understand when you guys see the inner process, we're all working together. That's awesome. Um, so Zach, What have I not asked you that I should have?
I don't know. To be
Okay.
totally honest, I don't know. I feel like um is there any Bruceisms that we didn't talk about that you want to dive into?
Well, if you want to talk about favorite songs and albums, I'll certainly listen. Or
Yeah.
the other thing uh, is there is there something you haven't heard that him do live that you are still wanting that's on your wish list?
Ooh, that's a good one. You know, he won't do it. There's
Yeah.
no way
Okay.
it won't ever happen. But the I've always joked with friends that I would love for him in the middle of his show to do the slow jam E Street Shuffle that they did in the 75 Hammersmith Odeon concert.
Okay.
Oh no, we lost me. There we go. But yeah, the 12 minute just, slow jam of the E Street Shuffle where he dips into Southside Johnny having a party, and just that I would love to hear that. Again, he'll never do it, but
That's awesome. That's a good one. That's good. No, I before I get you out of here, I'm gonna give you a chance to tell everyone where to find you and to touch base with you. But I end every show with a Mary question. So Jay Armstrong, who is an honors English teacher who's recently retired, he brought this question to me. When he was teaching high school English, his honors English, he would take 2 days and the seniors would break apart Thunder Road. They would look at all the lyrics, they would talk about the imagery of the song, they would talk about the themes that Bruce is exploring, and at the end of the 2 days, he would ask his class, does Mary get in the car? So that is your question, Zach. Does Mary get in the car at the end of Thunder Road?
so I have been thinking about this ever since you sent me that question because I've never thought about that before because I think Thunder Road, without a doubt, is my favorite song of his. And I'm sure a million other fans would agree. And I don't want to lie and say it's some weird deep cut from the Darkness outtakes or something.
Yeah.
Uh, but I mean, because even the piano only version that he does live like that, I just think it's one of the most beautiful songs ever written, in my opinion. But it's a tough one because they the end of the song is him asking her to get in the car. Like that's the end. The song ends. The saxophone solo goes on right after he asks the question. And part of me wants to say yes, but I think that date is just like boring and fine. Like I want to think that they get in the car and it's just a bad first date and they're not clicking and they kind of go home and they awkwardly try to like kiss at the door, but it turns into a hug, which turns into a kiss on the cheek, and it's just a bad day for everyone involved. The reason I think that is because the rest of the album, he's still trying to convince whoever he's talking to get in the car. Like Born to Run happens 4 songs later, and that's the same thing. So I think he keeps trying this MO of like, hey, get in the car. We got to get out of town and the town full of losers. We're pulling out of here to win. That and the reason I think that, yes, I'm joking and doing a bit right now, but I feel like in his early music, I mean, especially if you listen to Sandy, the characters are sort of these kind of quirky losers in a way. They're these kind of social outcasts who think that they're onto something, and maybe society thinks they're not. I mean, all of Sandy is him telling a girl that he likes about how he messed up other relationships.
Yeah.
It's just he keeps like talking about how bad he is as a boyfriend to Sandy. And so I don't know. I mean, I just think that at that point, the characters that he's talking about, I don't know if they've figured out their life yet. So I feel like in that moment in Thunder Road, maybe that's the first time he's tried this maneuver. Maybe that's the first time he's matured a little bit. The character, obviously, he's matured a little bit to just sort of be so bold, and just kind of knowing what it's like to be a teenager in New Jersey. I think she gets in the car and it's just they go to the movies or something and it's like fine.
I love that answer, Zach. That is a great answer. If someone wants to reach you, what's the best way?
They can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Zack Morrison 18. And because just like the high school trend of putting a number at the end of your AIM username,
Yes.
there's a guy in Hawaii who has at Zack Morrison on social, and he's just like a surfer dude, hasn't posted in 20 years, and I'm a little upset over that. But yeah,
Well,
at Zack Morrison 18 on online.
so I had to put Jesse Jackson DFW because I was getting angry people telling me that lives matter
Oh no.
over in Jackson, and and I was like, uh, I'm a 60-something old white guy obsessed with Bruce Springsteen and Doctor Who. Wrong guy. So this is
That's
great.
that's so funny.
Yeah, it was. Well, this was a blast. I appreciate it. Once you've got this sold and you're ready to promote it on streaming services, we're going to have you back.
Definitely.
Are you going to are you going to try to make a show this tour?
Yeah, I have tickets with my family to the Madison Square Garden tour, or
Okay.
to the show. We couldn't get Newark. I was really bummed about that. I want to go to the New Jersey show. But again, I think that we're not far off from getting a million football stadium dates. So
That's the rumor is I've heard different times that this could be pretty quick. I have set that expectation with my lovely bride. Usually in the fall, we go a family vacation with her sister and her sister's husband, the four of us. And I've kind of set the expectation. The fall, Bruce may be touring. We may have to do that. So she has given me blessings for that. So great. All right, Zack, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Listeners, go check it out. The link to his film is there in his Twitter bio. It is a fun 15 minutes. It is worth your time. Let's keep him in mind, and he'll be announcing good news soon, we hope. But for now, be safe, be kind, and we'll talk to you soon. Goodbye. There we go, another episode. I'm about to go through a couple of things where you can reach me and give me feedback. So if you want to skip this, I understand. But I do hope you check it out every once in a while. I'm available on Twitter at Jesse Jackson DFW. The show is available at SetListingBruce. You can send me an email, setlistingbruce@gmail.com. You can send me a voicemail at 469-249-2442. I am currently doing a few other podcasts. Perfectly Good Podcast, John Hyatt from A to Z, where Sylvan Groth and I discuss every John Hyatt song in alphabetical order. My Babylon 5 podcast is Last Best Hope for Conversation, where Lou, Karen, and I discuss every episode of Babylon 5 in chronological order. I still am doing Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast with my brother in time, Charles Skaggs. And then finally, How Many Podcasts, the only podcast on the internet that counts, where my buddies and I discuss pop culture. You can go to our Patreon page and support the podcast for as little as $1 a month. You can go to our Facebook page, like, and please, please go to iTunes or wherever you get your podcast and leave a 5-star rating and review for all of the podcasts that I'm doing. It's okay if you don't listen to them, but if you subscribe and rate, it really will make my day better. Thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
You just heard the fun talking, hard rocking, music loving, album ranking, fan thinking, joy spreading, lyric reading, story sharing podcast that is the one, the only Set Listing Bruce. The theme for Set Listing Bruce was written by David Rosen, used by permission.